Hey, so good afternoon, everyone, here in Manila and also as well as there in Tokyo. Welcome to our lecture series entitled Filipino Lens on Japanese Fashion, Art, and Culture. My name is Waki.
And I am Kenzo, and we are delighted to be your host for this exciting event. Today, we have an enriching lineup of lectures, discussions, and insights that explore the perspectives of Filipinos who are deeply interested in Japanese aesthetics, traditions, and culture.
But first, may we invite everyone to please stand for our opening prayer. Now let us all remember that we are in the holy presence of God. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Saint John Baptist de la Salle, pray for us. Saint Benilde Manson,
Pray for us.
live Jesus in our
For
hearts. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Please be seated. Okay, so to begin, I would like to invite Miss Ionica Abraham Lim, Benil's Fashion Design and Merchandising Program Chairperson, to deliver opening remarks. Round of applause, please.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Marami tayong roles for today. So again, good morning and welcome to today's lecture series. We have a lot of new knowledge for everyone. So I hope you guys will listen to our invited guest speakers. We have also friends from Japan and also in New York who are joining us via Zoom. Um, Embrace this good opportunity that we have today. And I would like to, invite you also to ask questions later sa ating mga speakers, okay? So I won't make this long. Thank you very much for spending your Friday morning until afternoon. Afternoon na pala. All right? So thank you very much again.
Thank you, Miss Ionica. Next, we also have a video message from the Philippine Ambassador, Japan, Honorable Ambassador Mylene J. Garcia Albano. Let's all refer to the video.
Thank you, Honorable Ambassador Mylene J. Garcia Albano. It is an honor to be here today as we embark on this cultural journey. Japan and the Philippines share a rich history of exchange and influence. The lecture series aims to delve into the multifaceted dimensions of Japanese fashion, art, and culture through the unique perspective of Filipino scholars, artists, and cultural enthusiasts. I hope you find today's lecture both enlightening and inspiring. Thank you.
To start off, our first lecture, entitled Japanese War Record Paintings, will be presented by Dr. Vincent Tan. He has a PhD in Design Science under Kyoto Institute of Technology, a board member of the Professional Regulatory Board of Interior Design, and the former chairperson of the Interior Design Program of De La Salle College of St. Benil. Let us all welcome Dr. Vincent Tan.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone. So I'm Vincent and I will be talking about my PhD topic when I was a student in Japan. So I don't know how this has anything to do with fashion, pero hopefully ma-inspire kayo and maybe, you know, I can probably even I don't know, talk about like the trajectory of how I got here because I'm originally an interior design graduate. So I'm actually an interior designer. Went to Japan on a scholarship, and I was supposed to study museums in Japan, particularly community museums. However, while I was going around there, I kind of thought like maybe this topic is not so interesting or as interesting as I thought it would be. Maybe I wasn't looking at the right places. Probably that's the reason. And then during my going around the different museums, I stumbled upon this topic. And so like, oh, how fascinating for me. So hindi ko alam kung fascinating din siya sa inyo. Kasi this is about World War II. And for many of you here, this is ancient history. Even for me, it's ancient history. It's like me talking about the 80s when your parents were talking about when they were young. So anyway, this is the topic and hope you find it at least man lang interesting and maybe something that you want to see in the future. Okay, so we'll talk about Japanese war record paintings. Next slide, please. Oh, wait. Okay, I have my note. Where do I point it? Hmm. Technical issues. I don't think the battery is working. Kasi hindi umiilaw eh. Yun. So anyway, so what will be the topic or this is generally the outline that maybe we can talk about today. Doesn't really have a lot of things to do with the Philippines, but I'll try to make it as relatable to us. Kasi I think that's the problem with many Filipinos nowadays. And you can see it actually in the news. Like a lot of things are happening in the world and yet you don't hear about it. And the only time that you hear there's something happening, say in the Middle East, is because a Filipino was involved. It's as if what happened in the Philippines does not resonate with us. So kung merong lindol na nangyari sa ibang bansa, walang Pilipinong nasugatan sa lindol. Tapos na. So kung walang taong namata or Pilipino na involved sa Ukraine, kebs na rin tayo. 'Di ba? Such a parang I'm sorry pero parang it's very very parochial, very narrow-minded na especially given the realities that we are facing today. So anyway, ito 'yon. Let's go to the next one. Please, so ano ba tong war record painting? So I'm sure you've seen a lot of images and Japan is a country that produces a lot of spectacular images that probably you've even used in your design concepts. One, probably you've seen the Great Wave of Kanagawa by Hokusai. It's like, oh, I love that. I want to use that as an inspiration. So, is that part, no? Anyway, they have a great tradition kasi, oh no. So medyo, I'm sorry for the sabog na formatting kasi I don't have Windows at home. So anyway, marami kasing salita yan eh. And the reason why I place this is because there is a very narrow set of images that I worked on while I was doing my PhD. It was only 153 paintings. Could you believe that? Do a PhD on 153 paintings. Ang liit, 'di ba? That's why I had to do this distinction. So many time you'll see this you'll see different terms to refer to images of war in Japan, particularly those that refer to from the first Sino-Japanese war, even the war with Russia, until up to the end of World War II. So sometimes we see them as senso sakusen, kirokuga. So literally, ano to, um, war record painting. Sorry, ano to? Oh my God, I'm sorry. Japanese is not so good anymore. Sakusen is like strategy. So war like strategy, record painting. So senso kirokuga is like war record painting. Senso guys just more generic, no? It's war painting. Tapos senso kinenga, so, war memorial painting. Sometimes they even have a paintings referred to as senso ken no kinokuga. It's like an offering. So dito pa lang sa terms, no, you can kind of get an idea of what these paintings were used for. But for the thing that I studied, this is the only one that I did, the 153 paintings. And they refer to a very specific, very narrow set of paintings. Okay. Next, please. Okay, so some characteristics, no, you'll see that guy later on at the end of the paintings. No? So war record paintings. So next slide. Ayaw na. Okay, so styles, no? So, we mentioned earlier that Japan is one of those countries that has a great tradition of producing many, many different images. So, as you can see here, if you're not very familiar or not very don't you haven't trained your eye to look at it, they might look like they kind of look the same, no? But they're different in a way na one of them, the ones on the left, on your left, no, these are the ones that are referred to as nihonga. So essentially, these are Japanese style paintings, watercolor or water-based pigments, usually on silk. So very big. There is a certain way of doing it, just like when you see an ukiyo-e, it has a very distinctive design or art vocabulary or style, no? Meron talagang paraan ng paggawa. And if you immerse yourself in these images, you can easily tell, no? Oh, that one's Chinese, that one's Korean, this one is Japanese, and this Japanese thing is from the Kamakura period, or from this is by the Arimpa style, no, painting or folding screen, ganon. So this genre refers comes is an ano ba is a successor to that long tradition of Japanese style paintings. The one on your left, you've probably seen this. This probably seems more familiar to you because they are very Western in their style. So, perspective, proportions of the human body, composition, and aside from yung the physical aspects of it, like it's oil on canvas. So, now for this one, in World War II, there was really a preference for everything Japanese. So, like, okay, Asian, Japanese will prioritize that. And then anything that is Western is considered as degenerate, unpatriotic, something that has to be spurned. Ayaw natin yan. However, in the world of painting, in this style, in this genre of paintings, they actually prefer the Western style, because they appreciated how massive you can make it, really really big. And I'll show you pictures later on how big they can actually be. So, they appreciated how photorealistic it looks, and therefore that kind of points to the name, no? Senso kinen, like record painting record. How are you going to record something if it's not, if it's abstract? No? So, corollary to this, no? Not meaning to say that only this kind of paintings were produced, no, yung mga photorealistic. There were a lot of painters who were doing avant-garde works also. Okay? And some of the painters who were commissioned to do these war paintings were also avant-garde painters. But then they shifted their style to do something like this, or those who did not want to be involved in the making of this kind of paintings were they were turned away. Because it's like, oh, that's degenerate. You've probably heard that in your art history classes when they talk about when you get to World War I, World War II, the Nazis, um all of that. And then you hear all of these mga painters na hindi na, ayaw sa kanila ng Nazis, no? Kasi mga avant-garde artists sila, yung mga Dadaist, ano pa ba, yung mga avant-garde painters, yung mga panahon na ayaw nila. So gusto nila ito, yung mga ganito, no? Madaling maintindihan daw, easy to understand. At the same time, it also serves as it serves as a propaganda tool also for the people who are in power, no? So this is essentially art in the service of the nation service, daming quotation marks. Okay, next please. Okay, so this is one of those. So this is in the West. This is in the Nihonga style, the Japanese style artworks, and you can see it's in the form of a six-part folding screen. So this is by Ibara. I'm sorry, pero the names probably will not be familiar to you, but this is by Ibaraki Sampu, but probably quite a popular Japanese painter in the Japanese style. So Suisoka no Shutsugeki, or the launching of a submarine. Okay. By the way, if I especially for those in Japan, if I make a mistake in the translation or the reading of a kanji, please forgive me. I haven't touched this topic in 14 years. Okay, so ever since I came back in 2011, I hardly talked about this topic because I went to a different field. Okay. Can we go to the next one? So, okay. So this is an example or a picture of a catalog, uh, for those paintings that were commissioned to be part of that collection, of the propaganda arm of the Japanese government, to promote the war, to steer nationalism, to make people support the ongoing war. I don't know if you've heard of the um, Great Asia Prosperity East Prosperity Spear. So the Japanese had this vision of uniting all Asians, Asia for Asians, and driving out the foreign, evil, degenerate Western influences and keep Asia for Asians. Of course, the thing that doesn't really get said there, but was obvious to everyone, was they saw themselves as the leader of the Great East Asia Prosperity Sphere, which is brings me to an encounter that I had. One of the early encounters I had with Japanese students. We were talking about the Philippines, and the role of the Philippines in that. So I say, "Oh, you're from the Philippines," and it's like, "Oh," and the Japanese students say, "We're sorry about what happened during World War II." And it's like, "Oh, no, no, it's fine. I think we kind of already got over it, you know." And then I used the word shokuminchika, colonization, and then they were like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, wait, that did not happen." We came in. Pumasok lang kami. And I was like, no, 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 that did not happen. From our point of view, you did not just come in. You invaded us and you turned us into a colony of yours. So there is always, even up to today, there are some arguments still hanging about terminologies. And I think if you study in Japan, you will always quibble about terminologies. I remember getting into a minor debate with my professor about whether to use the word occupation, invasion, yeah, pretty much like invasion or yeah, arrival, invasion, occupation. So, yun. So medyo nag-usap kami and then then essentially we just settled on the safer bet. So that's actually one of those mga, yeah, I got myself into a lot of awkward moments when I was studying there because it's like, oh my god, is this guy just here to make us look bad? And so there's this beef. So, and so like not really. I just want to know. So I actually learned a lot more about the Philippines while doing this, even if my main topic was about Japan. So in any case, here you can see, guys, Seisen Bijutsu Tensho. So very important yung paggamit nila ng salitang Seisen. So, because it means holy war, literally translated into holy war. So they saw it as not just like, okay, we're going to war, I'm going to bash in heads. No, this is something noble. This is something that we have to do. This is something about like the spirit of people. At have you watched Godzilla -1? Eh, the bida, the protagonist there was a former kamikaze pilot who didn't, sorry, spoiler, who didn't go push through with the intention. Okay? Well, if you listen to it um, using the original Japanese dub, okay, you will not hear the word kamikaze, which is for us is familiar. No, they use the word tokotai, okay, which is essentially direct assault squad. Yeah, literally direct assault squad. So, pero when you hear it, it sounds very innocuous. 'Di ba? Parang you wouldn't think that it would be a squad of airplanes crashing themselves into whatever, into their targets. No? So anyway, let's move to the next slide, please. Okay, so how prevalent was it? There are a lot of paintings. Some of them started as in this style, no. Marami yan. But some of the thing that I studied essentially started around 1939. So it's not really World War II yet, but the second Sino-Japanese War, they started doing this. Ay, anong nangyari? Lumaking masyado yung slide. Merong part na naputol. May text. Anyway, so this is a painting, no, that was done during that time period, say 1941. And then these paintings would be regularly exhibited. No? Kasi you saw the catalog. So obviously there was an exhibit for it. So how prevalent they? Most of them were in Tokyo. In this one particular museum, the Tokyo Metropolitan Art Museum in Ueno Park. They would be visited by members of the royal family, mga generals, and also the general public, no? Kaya it's mga bata dinadala nila, no, para tumingin sa mga paintings na ito, no. And then they would be the exhibits will be or would be advertised in major newspapers like the Asahi newspaper, as well as aside from the catalogs, no, the art magazines, nandun din sila. I'm sure they were also advertised in radio and all of that, no? But I don't think there are recordings of the radios. No? So don't really have any evidence of that. So when I was doing this, mostly I was consulting a lot of newspapers and magazines. Okay. So ayun. Okay. So can we go to the next one, please? So at least the reason why I placed the photos here is that you can actually get a taste of how big the paintings were. So, so I saw a study that related this to the idea of a panorama can or a panorama paint hall. It's an old style of entertainment wherein you have a big hall, and then they would surround it with many different paintings to give you a general view of the place, a panoramic view of whatever it is that they want to show. So most of the time, the paintings were in life size. So kung gaano kalaki yung tao, in real life, ganun din kalaki yung tao sa painting. So supposedly I've never done ano, I've never done Japanese style paintings, but supposedly this is very hard to achieve daw, or very challenging to achieve in a Japanese style painting. But because of the training in Western style painting, so the painters in the Western style were much more able to do it in a more convincing manner than the Japanese style painters. So there again, you see another other members of the Japanese imperial family looking at the paintings in a very posed manner. Okay. Next, please. Ayun. So, gaano siya kalaki? As in, malaki. malaki. Okay. So, another article from the Asahi Shimbun. Medyo naputulan yan, but at the end of that part, yeah, you can see my notes when I was struggling how to read those things, because a lot of the characters that they use here, they don't really use in everyday Japanese nowadays anymore. And then they use this word nikudan, essentially like a meat bomb, referring to the soldiers. Yun, here. So this one is I think this is a picture of a battle in Mongolia. So prior to World War II. So next, please. Okay, so can you guess what this is? Kasi it doesn't really say in the title, di ba? Junigatsu Yoka no Shinjuan. If you don't know Japanese, this is the attack on Pearl Harbor. Junigatsu Yoka, the 4th of December in Shinjuan. So Shinjuan is the name for Pearl Harbor, literally Pearl Harbor. Siya. I don't have a photo of this one in color, but this is done by one of the most popular Japanese painters, no, si Fujita Tsuguharu. He did a lot of paintings. He wasn't supposedly there, no, but he based this painting on photos taken by the pilots who attacked Pearl Harbor. No. So I don't know. I'm trying to make connections kasi with what's happening now in the West Philippine Sea. And ano, pero nandun kasi siya sa kabila eh. Okay. Anyway, I'll try to do that towards the end. Okay, next please. Okay, so sabi mo mga Pilipino kasi minsan ayaw hindi interesado pag wala yung Pilipinas. So ito na. So this is a painting done by personally one of my favorite war record painters. Nagkaroon ako ng favorite, si Miyamoto Saburo. So, of General Honma and Wainwright. So, when the two generals met after ba the the fall of Bataan, prior to the death march, to surrender the Philippines to the Japanese. So this is an actual photo of the meeting. This is the painting, also pretty big, almost life size. And then this is the newspaper article advertising the picture and the exhibit where it was shown. So as you can see, it's almost a one-to-one correspondence with the painting. So this head is that head. This head is that. This head is that. At yun, nandun sila. So almost one-to-one. correspondence. I can go on and on about like how the painter looks like it's just like peeking. No, meron mga I've seen some studies that talk about like the perspective that the painters took while they were when doing the work. So parang sumisilip lang sila. They're not really a part of that. And then most of the time, you see the backs of people, no, not the front. No? So it kind of reinforces the more journalistic aspect of the paintings. No? So parang, oh, this is really a record, no? And supposedly not a recreation of it. But this is a painting. And if you remember your art history, konting art theory, no, this is already the time when mass media, the main media was print, newspapers, and uh, radio. Wala pa masyadong, I don't think, may TV na ba nung panahon na to? Wala pa ito, or hindi pa ganun ka widespread. So how do you promote all of these things? So it's really through these kinds of medium. And you can always argue na if it's a photo, why not a photograph? No? If the intention is to record, why not a photograph? Why does it have to be a painting? See? Now, for that, we can use mga frameworks like when you talk about art, how how much value do you place on a painting as opposed to a photograph? Of course, all of these things are invented. It's like why is a painting more valuable, quote unquote, than a picture? I'm sure a lot of you here nagbebenta siguro kayo ng stickers. Bakit yung sticker ko art naman yan pero hindi ko mabenta at 5,000 pesos, only 20? So, yeah, there are certain constructs that we work with, no, about medium, about effort, and that how much value we place on it. Kasi you can always argue that all of these artworks, they don't really mean anything. They don't have any value. The value that we place on them is all invented by us. Anyway, next, please. Okay, so this is another one, no? So Hong Kong Nyoku Sakai Shireganen Yang Sotoku no Kaiget. This is on the fall of Hong Kong. Now notice the common use of the word Kaiget. So mga paintings na to, like the previous painting and this one, they're essentially surrender paintings. This is one country giving up their territory to another country. But it doesn't really say in the title. All they mention is Kaigen, meeting. Very sanitized. Di ba? Just like, this is the date, very journalistic, of what happened in Pearl Harbor. But does it tell you about what happened in Pearl Harbor? Does it tell you about what is happening in this painting? Wala talaga. See? Not, at least not in the title. The explanation comes in the form of articles that accompany these paintings when they were advertised in the newspapers. See? So very important yung newspaper na at that time to give context, no, to paintings like this. No? So parang ano lang, like, when we see a picture on social media, it's like ano to, you scroll through the comments to find at the context for what you're looking at. So ayun, next please. Okay, so another one by Miyamoto Saburo. It's like really prolific. So this one is about the fall of Singapore, between General Yamashita and General Percival. Again, the use of the word kaigen, meeting lang, but it's actually a surrender. Okay, next, please. Okay, so this one is the fall of Singapore. No, again by Miyamoto Saburo, and the very extensive explanation of the painting and the exhibit. It was shown in the Asahi newspaper. Next, please. Ito na. Yun yung sabi ko kanina about kamikaze and how they don't really use the word kamikaze. They use the word tokotai. So, these are sila yan. Okay, next, please. So this is 1994. Another one, no? So if you notice, like in the early parts, they were very triumphant, no? It's like, yay, nananalo tayo. But we all know where it ended up later on. By the time you get to 1944, that's when they started. Siguro, a lot of people, a lot of scholars say na, probably the Japanese were seeing na parang, oh, maybe tumatagilid tayo. We're getting behind on the war, no? So they were trying to consolidate their forces siguro, no? And giving more responsibilities to the people that they conquered. So they started giving them or granting them independence. So it happened here, it happened here. Ito, this is a painting, Koi Soryohe of Biruma Dokuritsu Shikitensu. So a picture of the independence ceremony of Burma. So it went really, really bad for them in Burma. But they painted this with that idea na, hey, we're really doing our part, no? When we said that we are going to give you independence and free you from the yoke of Western imperial power. So remember all of the, wait, yeah, all except for Thailand, the countries around Southeast Asia, essentially we were colonies. So, okay, next please. Tapos, okay. So, when you look, when you visit when you look at these paintings, they're very, very big. By the time you get towards the end, like this is 1945, a picture of what happened in Saipan. So one of the things that happened there was the Japanese saw that, oh, the Americans are advancing and advancing towards, papuntang Philippines. They were starting to recover some of the islands that they lost earlier in the war. So yung mga nandun sa Saipan, instead of being captured, supposedly they jumped off the cliff. And they commit, instead of being caught by the Japanese, or no, instead of being captured by the Americans or surrendering to the Americans, they decided to commit suicide instead. So there is a very famous cliff in Saipan, um, remembering or where this place happened. So I'm not saying was Fujita there. So obviously hindi. Now, this is a recreation of what happened. Now, when you look at this one, kind of reminds you of some very, very famous paintings like The Wrath of the Medusa by Delacroix, or even yung La Barca de Acheronte by Hidalgo. So, hindi ko sinabi na may kinalaman si Hidalgo dito, no? Pero it's from that lineage kasi Wrath of the Medusa, yung, again by Delacroix. So parang ganun siya. And then when if you look also at the colors, for example, that were used in the beginning, so a lot of them are very bright, and then towards the end, it's starting to look very muddy and almost monochromatic. Okay. So let's go to the next one. This one is another, also again by Fujita Atsuto Gyokusai, um, often translated into English as Final Fighting in Atu. So it's an island, South Pacific, wherein, again, instead of surrendering to the Americans, the Japanese decided to unalive themselves. So I don't really have time to go into that idea of the Byokusai, literally like breaking of the jewel. So it kind of gives you a hint about how much how important the idea of spirit was in with winning the war. They had this oh my god, yeah, well, I don't have time to go into it. It's gonna be boring for you anyway. Okay, so some featured artists, no. Oh my god, am I making sense? So eto sila, no. All of these, I think all of these photos were taken after the war. I actually have photos of them while they were painting the paintings. I just couldn't find them in my files. So Fujita Tsugaru, my actually gusto ko rin yan si Koi Soryohe. Tsaka, pero favorite ko talaga si Miyamoto Saburo. It was like, God, that guy is good in terms of technique. What happened? After the war, all of them got ashamed. Nahiya sila. What happened, their activities during the war. Some of them did not even want to talk about it, which is very similar to what happened. Again, dapat to pineg ko na lang sa Godzilla minus one eh. Remember that um yung kapitbahay niya, si Sumiko, the lady who was taking care of the child. And it's like, wala na, wag na natin pag-usapan yan. Wala na, sabi nila, mananalo tayo. Tapos ito lang pala ang mangyayari sa atin. She was very bitter, no, about it. Supposedly, I think her character was like a distillation of the general mood of the Japanese population after the end of World War II. Kasi in the propaganda, they would always say like, we are going to win this holy war with the strength of our Japanese spirit. You hear that word hanggang ngayon, di ba? Yamato Damashi, the Japanese spirit. Okay. And like with our population, it's like Ichioku, I forgot the slogan. We're gonna win this. And then, yeah, the nuclear bomb happened. Oh, and then things just fell out. So ayun. So many of them are very hesitant to talk about this. Let's go to the next slide, please. So post World War II events, how embarrassed were they, you know? So even when the Americans arrived, they saw the value of these paintings. So parang, wait, we cannot just let this uh go around anywhere. Supposedly there were some artists, no, because there were a lot of paintings produced. Many of them got destroyed because they don't want to be associated with the Japanese Imperial Army. Kasi a lot of these painters then, like Fujita, they got drafted into the army. So they were given military titles. So like, oh, Captain Fujita, where are you going to be assigned? You're going to be assigned in the Fine Arts Division. Your duty is to make paintings. So they don't want to be associated with the Japanese and then the Americans. So you see there, si MacArthur, the one on your right, looking at a painting of the Philippines. I'll show you a picture of that painting later on. Looking at them in an exhibit that they organized for Americans. So they even kind of shows you like, oh, look at those paintings. No? Parang ano ba to? We'll show it to the other Americans. No? We'll confiscate them. Some of them are in Manchuria. Some of them I think were in Korea. But we'll collect them and then we'll put that in an exhibit. Okay. So next slide, please. Okay. So this was also written about in many American publications like Life magazine. Okay. Next, please. Okay. So yeah, and I think this is also from Life magazine. Next, please. Okay. Again, yeah, more photos of magazines. This Pacific War, I think that's a magazine for the military, U.S. military. Okay. Next, please. So where are they now? No, nasaan na sila? If you want to look at these paintings, you can go to next slide. Yan, nandun lang sila. So, it's in the National Museum of Modern Art. So if you're in Tokyo, you can go to Takebashi Station and then just go and look at the paintings. Will you be able to see all of them? Of course not. You'll probably only see like 2 or 3. And I want you to notice, pay attention how they exhibit it. Last time I was there, admittedly many, many years ago, everything was bright and colorful. And, by the time you get to the Japanese paintings, the, the light suddenly dimmed and you can hardly see them. It's like, and then the walls were painted gray. So it's like them saying like, hey, your mood should be subdued by this time. And you can actually see people bow down. So I don't know why they're bowing down. Are they ashamed? Do they want to pay tribute? Especially when you look at those paintings where people are committing suicide. How are you going to react to that? You know that your ancestors, those are your ancestors. So they are in indefinite loan. No? So I mentioned earlier that they were confiscated by the Americans, but the Americans still own them up to today. They are only on indefinite loan. So pinahiram lang sa kanila. By all intents and purposes, it's under the Japanese, the responsibility, under the care of the Japanese. But who owns them? It's still the Americans. Merong mga paintings that alam kong nawawala. I think there are 3 paintings that are missing from the original. I couldn't find where. Nobody knows where they are. Next, please. So some scenes set in the Philippines. Cavite. Hello, Pogo Hub. So this is the naval shipyards in Cavite. Sa may unahan is the Pogo Hub by Miwa Chose. This is Clark Field, Pampanga, with another attack, 1942. So very, very early on in the war by Satoke. Next, please. Yung Miyamoto Saburo na meeting between General Honma and Wainwright. And then next, ah, this is a picture of the Bataan Death March. And actually, when I saw this one, it's like, whoa, this is it? Because it doesn't really say anything in the title. Shigatsu Kokonoka no Kiroku. A record of the fourth, Kokonoka 7th or 9th. Sorry. Ninth. 9th of April. So yun lang. So pag mga ganito, kailangan talaga ng newspaper article to give context to what you are seeing. Next, please. Birth of the New Philippines. Shimpi, no, Piroku or something. Dokuritsu, something. So this was, the entire thing was actually done at the Manila Hotel. I've been supposedly nasa ilang-ilang room daw to but I've never been there. Kasi, ano. And anyway, you can actually identify some of the people here. So that's Laurel. Nasan ba yung si yeah. Basta si Laurel yan. General Homa. Okay. I don't know. Maybe you can look also. You can read into it many things. Like look at how the Japanese are posed, and then look at how they portray the Filipinos. Naninigarilyo pa ako dun sa kaysa. Anyway, I'll not go into that. Next, please. This is a dogfight off the coast of Leyte naman. So malapit na matapos yung gera nito. And next, please. So this is a picture of Corregidor. This painting is not part of the 153 Hirokugano, but it is about the Philippines. I don't even know where it is. I've never seen it in real life. But this is one from Corregidor, and I think the last one. So Manjiro Terauchi Manjiro. Japanese troops are looking at Manila from afar. So there were actually several Japanese painters who came to Manila, to the Philippines, specifically to paint paintings about the war. But it wasn't one of the big painters. It wasn't Fujita or Koiso Ryohei or Miyamoto Saburo. It's one of the more like second tier na painters, but still pretty interesting, I think. And I think that is it. Ayun. So if you to wrap it up, if you notice, like a lot of the things that were shown, a lot of the scenes shown here in the paintings are still very relevant and still very important to us strategically nowadays. And I'm trying to look for mga links kasi on how the strategy, for example, of the Philippine government is when we have to deal with China in the West Philippine Sea. Because we have this strategy of transparency. That's why you have photos of videos of what happened, what's happening there, and then we put it on media. But then you see also China doing the same thing, and then they have their own spin of the same event. Di ba? Na parang naputulan na ng daliri yung isang kalaban natin. Tayo pa ang umatake. Parang, wow, girl. Ba't ganon? So, a lot of these paintings kasi when they were shown, at least in originally shown, at least in the newspapers, it was always about rah rah rah, Japanese spirit, we're gonna win the war. After the war, a lot of the propaganda or a lot of the things talking about these paintings was about we were fooled, niloko kami ng gobyerno namin, damasareta. Yun yung yun yung salita na karaniwang ginagamit. Tapos sometimes especially those that show death, no, it became more about remembrance and sacrifice. Not to say that there was no element of sacrifice during the war, but I think it was more heightened after the war to give that idea that war happened and lugi yung ordinaryong tao. Does it call attention to those who were in charge? Not so much, I think. Diba? So essentially, oh my God, yeah, not a very good summation. But it in sabi nga na matagal ko na hindi pinag-usapan tong topic na to. Um, ang ano lang talaga is, it's malleable. So, even if you see something like, oh, that looks so obvious what it is. Without context, you can use it any way you want. And I'm sure all of you here have lived through that experience. You post a photo, it's very innocent, and then somebody takes it in the wrong way, and then suddenly, it's a flame war. Okay. So yun. So maraming salamat sa pakikinig. Thank you. Sana may napulot kayo.
Thank you, Dr. Vincent Tan, for that very insightful lecture. Now we will be opening the floor for 2 questions. If you guys have any questions about the topic, just feel free to raise your hand. The mic is just there on the center. Okay. They're thinking, they're thinking. Also, anyone in the Zoom who is in the Zoom right now, they may ask questions as well in the chat, and we will just read it out loud as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, hi. Wala lang. So I noticed you've said in the paintings that they're mostly attached with newsletters and context behind it. Were there some paintings that didn't have context, and has it caused like problem amongst people that it didn't have an explanation?
Okay, thank you for that wonderful question. Were there paintings that did not have any captions? A lot. As in, there were so many paintings. There were so many catalogs. I actually have one. I found it in a thrift shop. And it's like, oh my God, it's an actual catalog from that era. So I bought it. In that catalog, because I saw a lot of catalogs in archives, and so many pages. No, sometimes they would be this thick. No? And then there would be like photos of paintings na ganito kaliit. No? So lahat sila, ang daming walang captions. But the big ones, the ones that are commissioned, yeah, sorry, by the way, I forgot to mention earlier that the paintings that I showed you, most of them were commissioned by the military. Ibig sabihin, you're an artist, I'm going to pay you, I'm going to give you a military rank, I'm going to pay you to paint. And then it has to be big. We're gonna show it in shows. Oh. So yung mga malalaking mga paintings, yun talaga yung those are the ones that had a lot of explanation, a lot of context. The smaller ones, I think they were more about supporting the bigger paintings. So they didn't really have a lot of explanation. I think some of them they didn't even have formal titles. They just had the name of the artist. No? So ayun. Did it confuse people? I don't think so. Because um these were very popular. I've seen photos of little kids, like elementary school kids. They would go to the museums to look at the paintings. I've seen a cup. I'm not really sure because there were very small photos and I haven't seen some of the I think some of these paintings were reproduced in bigger sizes and then sent to the different places in Southeast Asia. Because I saw a couple of photos and articles here in the Philippines talking about paintings, no, war painting exhibit in the Philippines. Now, yung next, meron bang mga Pinoy na gumawa ng paintings na ganyan? Eh, nako, yan ang hindi ko alam. Pero we know that at least Amarsola did not do anything. Ko alam yung iba.
Okay, one more. Yeah.
So my question is it okay to use the war paintings for inspiration, be it by abstract inspiration or literally pasting the paintings on, let's say, clothing? Would it be labeled or subject to cultural appropriation?
Oh, ang hirap na. Thank you for that very wonderful question. In my opinion, as a former Miss Universe. Oh my God, that's a Bucon question. Um, I I don't know, but personally, and this is me personally, is it appropriate? Is it cultural appropriation? Really sure, because I think the topic or the subject isn't really particular to a culture unless it's like when you look at this, like does it say Japanese to you? Not really. Diba? It looks like a regular Western style painting. So in that sense, parang, you know, but is it distasteful? Yes, I think it's death and it's war and it's creepy. What is the intention of your work? Is it to call attention to a certain topic that gets ignored? Do you want to highlight something? I don't think the topic of death and war is taboo. But what do you intend to do with it? What do you want to highlight? If it's going to be about how fashionable you can be in the midst of a nuclear war, like post-apocalyptic, I don't know, housewife realness, that is going to be so weird. Di ba? Pero if, I don't know, fashion, in the sense of fashion kasi, I'm sure this is me looking at fashion. Di ba, I think, I don't know, Olive, fashion tends to be looked at as something frivolous, not essential, or not very essential. So, if you're going to like, oh, chic, oh, fashion, oh, work, girl, and then there's death around you, it's a very hard line to thread. But is it possible? I've seen it. And it's like, oh my God, that is beautiful. Very contextual siya. If it's going to be probably in the Met and it's about this, probably yes. Pero, you know, you don't want it to be like a derelict kind of situation. So there has to be a lot of, I think, self-awareness and sensitivity to it. I don't know. It's weird. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, do. Paisip ako dun, ah.
We have one last from Zoom naman. This is from Chelo Tarayao, and they asked, what other ways did they represent the loss of Japanese spirit artistically, apart from the monochrome shift towards the end?
If we're referring to, ano, i- is it referring to the paintings lang ba? Okay. Kasi, ano there, I kind of forgot to mention, but part of my study kasi was actually also looking at war paintings by other countries, no? Kasi the Japanese were not the ones who were only doing this. The Americans did it, the Russians did it, the Nazis did it, no? So ang dami-daming gumagawa ng gano'n. But the thing about the Japanese paintings, particularly towards the end, was they were really scared of showing defeat. Yung mga Americans kasi, although meron din naman sa ano, but it's not so overt. Parang how do you solve this conundrum that you're you feel like you're losing and yet you're still telling your people to keep fighting kahit na parang natatalo ka na? Is that very Naruto? Isn't that very anime? I'm sorry if I'm trivializing it. Pero 'di ba you see that in Japanese popular media nowadays? Guys, natatalo na tayo, pero with the strength of our love and friendship, we're gonna win this. Crystal halation. 'Di ba? So uh, was it portrayed in other ways? At least here, um, gan ganun lang talaga siya. But there are other ano kasi mga media din like mga paper ano kamishibai, um parang paper stage na ano parang puppetry na ano usually aimed towards kids. They also have that. And then of course there are a lot of martial anthems, music na produced din during this time. But most of the time it's really towards winning the war, no? And yun, defeat. Medyo clean answer, wala masyado. Pero ano if you read between the lines, there are a lot and I think for us sometimes or most of the time they look very contradictory. So, parang ito yung pinapakita pero parang ito yung sagot. So parang how do you reconcile those two things? Yun. Ayun. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you pa. Okay, thank you guys for your questions.
Our second lecture, Kawaii Culture, the Non-Aggressive and Non-Belligerent Counterculture, will be given by Miss Tracy Dizon, presenting all the way from New York. Miss Tracy is the 2019 NHK World Japan Kawaii International Kawaii Ambassador and former feature story content contributor for NHK, a fashion designer, curriculum writer, and teaching artist in New York, and 2009 Sugino Fashion College 47th Fashion Design Contest finalist. Let's welcome all the way from New York, joining us via Zoom, Miss Tracy Dizon.
Hi, everyone. So, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So, I need to share my screen. Give me a moment. Uh, oops. One moment. Okay. Present. Okay, hi everyone. Um, time check. Okay, I'll try to be as fast as I can, but I'm very passionate about this topic that I tend to like overshare. So like just give me like some um time check. I'll be as fast as I can because I know there are other speakers. But this topic is a kawaii culture, the non-aggressive and non-belligerent counterculture. Um this has been a topic that I have been passionately lecturing since 2013. So it's like 11 years that I have been doing this, even before moving to New York. I have done this lecture in UP Diliman and also in some Japanese schools in Yokohama. Um, but I think like it has grown. I think it's one of the reasons that like I won the NHK World Kawaii International as a Kawaii ambassador. It's because I really passionately dissected this topic because this is something that I personally believe in. I feel kawaii culture is not just like a fashion statement; it's also a lifestyle. There's also a philosophy behind it. But let's uh let's let's get this thing going. So first of all, it's non-aggressive and non-belligerent counterculture. This is such a topic that I've been strongly using, especially I'm now in the context of a New York, a Western environment. I always kind of like want to emphasize the Asian belief, like the Asian way of thinking is it is so different from our Western way of thinking. But like in the Filipino lens, I think we can all relate in many ways as this, because like Filipinos are non-confrontational. I think I haven't been in the Philippines for 5 years. I hope I'm still kind of I'm still in touch with the culture that it's Filipinos are non-confrontational. We we like harmony, pakikisama. So these little subtle things, I think it adds up to also the little subtle things that the resemblance and the way Filipinos and Japanese think in some little culture and pockets of culture. So okay. So first of all, kawaii meaning cute. I believe everybody knows what the meaning of kawaii is. I think it has become more popular like in the last 20 years, compare like no, maybe last 15 years, because like back then when I was in college, it was so hard to like research about Japanese fashion, Japanese culture. But like in the last decade, I think like it had been more popular among among the youth, like especially the youth. So meaning kawaii, childlike, is the term used for the phenomenon of the Japanese obsession with cute characters, toys, food, games, housewares, fashion. This affinity for kawaii has grown at a tremendous rate over the past 3 decades and has become an integral part of Japanese society. It's a form of rebellion. It's escapism and regression. Regression regression functions as forms of retreat, enabling a person to psychologically go back in time to a period when the person felt safer. So like I think like the Western or the popular context of rebellion is like, oh, you destroy, I'm against this. But like this is a more discreet way of rebelling, that like I just don't want to do it. I just don't want to I just want to go back to where when things are safer, when your childhood. So kawaii, a complementary adjective applied in mind-boggling varied ways, synonymous with beautiful, lovable, endearing, and quirky. kawaii have a lot to do with aesthetics, but it also reflects changes in society, social structures, and the role of women. This is what I like most about this because the role of women and the rise and fall of economy and a sense of national identity. Appeal of adolescence when one is not yet an adult. Kawaii things are usually soft, bright, round, and small. And this is a quote from the book, Kawaii, the Japan's Culture of Cute. They are they are not aggressive or belligerent. They give you peace of mind and a sense of security. So this is quoted from Keiko Nakamura, curator, Yayoi Meiji Museum. So it's a in the context. I mean, I assume that like my audience right now are very internet savvy, maybe a lot of like following influencers or something like um maraming kawaii influencers here and there, even like even into like the cosplay as well or whatnot. So I think it's under one umbrella. So I'll try to be fast because I have this whole history thing that hindi niyo naman maalala lahat to. Pero but I will just try to brush it on like to to just show that kawaii culture didn't just kind of become, it's not just a trend that like uso lang or something. It has deep roots within like the early history of Japan in literature and culture and aesthetics and arts. So Heian period to Edo era and Taisho era to post World War II. So let's just brush it. Let's like have a little bit of brush on the topics. So first, it's like the Heian period and the Edo era. The Pillow Book. If some of you have studied like Asian 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 history or like Japan history or something, um you might you might find this book you might find this books very relevant. Hold on, I couldn't see my screen because of the oh, I don't know how to do that. Okay. So um oh, there you go. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay. So the Pillow Book, Lady Sage Shonagon, Heian period, is a popular court literature that focuses on details of daily life, things that make the heart grow fonder. Early evidences of women's writing culture literature differs from political men culture. Not so. This is where like the um female energy of kawaii culture kind of like started, that it's like it's coming from it's like parang diary like na mga kwento ng mga girls ganyan. It because like most of the literature for the men in back in this time, it's mostly political, but it's when it's women it's mostly like dear diary ganyan. And then the other significant book is The Tale of Genji because it's kind of depict women are depicted as docile and animalistic. It's like like how Japan kind of has like they make Hello Kitty animated, like they kind of compare it to women. So next slide. Okay. And then kawaii culture. Okay. 1914, the birth of kawaii. So, I think if you can see the art, parang medyo art nouveau, art deco vibe siya. So parang 1914 to. So it's still kind of like in sync with the global aesthetic. So, but the ironic part is so Minatoya Ezo Shiten store in Tokyo. Forgive my pronunciation. I have not spoken Japanese in a very long time. So yung mga nauuso, I mean, ngayon it's like such a big hit, like Miniso, like Daiso, like selling postcards, letter sets. Sa dito nagsimula yan sa selling sa stationery goods. This shop is credited with being one of the first shops in Japan selling products designed specifically for young women, hence kicking off the kawaii movement. So the ironic part is this was part of a discussion that I had in one of my lectures. The godfather of kawaii, isn't it ironic that godfather of kawaii is is a man, and then like he's an artist, poet, illustrator, East meets West illustration. So East meets West, it's there's already a context that it's non-traditional Japanese style, because East meets West, and then thin bodies, big eyes, melancholy expression. So yung store nila, yung nag-coin ng kawaii word, but used by his ex-wife. So technically, the one who coined the word kawaii is still a woman. So but the ex-wife of tak, tak, Takehisa. So at least we ano pa rin, pwede pa rin i-own ng female woman energy ang word na kawaii. That's the most important part of that. Kawaii history, organically, sociologically, it's kind of like it started with letter writing, coin term for cute handwriting, where emoji was derived. So the emojis that we use in like our phones, it also came about from the kawaii handwriting. Form of passive rebellion. Many young people felt that adulthood was too harsh and strict, requiring too much responsibility. They view it as a loss of freedom. Instead of rebelling by aggression or by being sexually provocative as in the West, they rebelled by being cute and childlike, cherishing immaturity and fun. So like I don't know if we're still in that generation that passing on notes is like it's like it's like your way of it's like your way of rebellion na nagpapass ka ng notes and make fun of your teachers, or wag niyong gawin yun, pero but like back in the 80s, or during the time that I was like a student, that it's kind of form of a rebellion, but like it's like a very passive kind of rebellion, but somehow it also developed like the handwriting. If like, just to put it out there, Japan has the one of the most like hand handcrafting skills in many ways, like the origami. They have the best pens, they have the best writing materials, drawing materials out there in the market. So it's also part of that. um so this one, I'll just make it fast. Kawaii culture history during the world Taisho era in the post World War II. So the Great Kanto earthquake, it kind of just basically, the most important part is that the earthquake kind of gave a chance to the west side, the Kansai region, to also grow. And the post World War, post post-war, sorry, for the post-war, it had been paper dolls. I think like even back in the 80s, I still see this kind of like paper dolls, but like, so after the war era, girls did not have to grow up so fast, because like, of course, during the war, the girls were doing the men's job, and the men were sent to the war. Men went back to work, so female women, balik wala na, they don't really have much to like to 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 do technically. So like they have more chance to be young, and that's how the setup is. So this is a very important idea, the retention by adults of traits previously seen only in juvenile, and it's a subject studied in the field of developmental biology. In neoteny, the physiological or somatic development of an organism is typically an animal is slowed or delayed. In contrast, in progenesis, sexual development occurs faster. Both oh, technical words, but technically, as you can observe your anime, and like the doll here is like it's adapted by the kawaii culture life doll. um they're really kind of known for their big heads and big eyes. It kind of is an expression of like you want to go back to your childhood, like the the proportion compared to like the adult proportion is very evident in like the illustrations. I didn't know about this until like I realized. Personally, I was like just drawing. I was just drawing like my fashion illustration, and I Mom Yags is one of my teachers before that. I I make like really disproportional fashion illustration, and then but then I realized that like there's like a synergy towards like, yeah, maybe I'm into like being childlike in my illustration because of like, and it kind of just made sense that like I like big eyes, big heads, and it's kind of like reverting back to your childhood. So famous illustrators, notable shoujo manga illustrators, reflected the ideal beauty of Japanese women and childlike round eyes. So this, just take note that this is after World War II. So there's already a lot of like Western influences, but it reflected like the anime is so ironic that like it's anime, but if you observe them, they kind of look Western. But now, but the good part about it is they Japanized everything, that like they made it their own. So basically, the shoujo is a young woman story, like mga J drama kind of stories. I think this is where manga also started. Yeah, so, and well, this is just one of the most significant illustrator. So he is Rune Naito, illustrator, doll artist, designer, essayist, 1950s and 60s, was responsible for cover and illustrations of overwhelmingly popularity of the fashion magazine, turned the old pretty look on kitsch girl image. So obviously Japan has a love for fashion, just like from the start of it's like how China is in love with like food, like Japan has innate love for fashion. So it reflects that like even um I don't I don't like, how to say it. It reflects that like there are, even back in the days, it's already like fashion illustration. The illustration is for fashion basically. Okay, this is the most important part, at least mas malapit sa age group nating lahat. Kawaii cult revolution, 1960s, 70s, and up until now. So kawaii characters, female character figures. So 1960s to 70s. Again, I like to emphasize that it's a woman, it's a very female energy culture. After World War II, baby boom, more teenagers, more market for goods. Idealism of beauty revolved around youthfulness. So, and innocence of like a teenager or pre-adolescent girl. So this is para siyang natural na hindi naman, wala naman nagsabi sa society na, oh, ito yung maganda para sa inyo. Parang this is just coming from like the self-reflections of women or the society itself. Hindi naman siya dinictate na ito yung maganda or and whatnot. But this is what appealed to the Japanese audience apparently. And more about that in the next slide. Okay. So this is a very interesting doll because like just a side note, I wrote a whole entire curriculum about Barbies and dolls and how important it is in the fashion culture. But this and this has like a side connection to it. So US doll wasn't very attractive to domestic buyers. Barbie didn't appeal to the Japanese young girls' sensibilities, so they made a localized Barbie features that features that suit Japanese taste. So um when they introduced, even if Barbie is a fashion doll, it didn't sell right away in Japan because they like their idea of beauty is different. So more clean in appearance and more appropriate for young girls. Tommy has always valued opinions from children. The toy maker invited about 20 individuals, including small girls ranging from 3 to 6, and their parents to play with prototypes to find their preferences. We pay attention to their responses and make in a not in not in a self-centered manner. So that's where they discovered that like it is more appealing that this kind of like childlike beauty. And again, Blythe westernized doll. Blythe doll is made by a toy company, Kenner, inspired by Betty Boop and Margaret Keane paintings. Margaret Keane is known for the Big Eyes movie. So she also Blythe Neoteny. It didn't get much consumer following in the US, but it was bought by in 2001. It was bought by a Japanese brand, where now they release it in Japan, because again it's appreciated, that this kind of beauty is appreciated in Japan. And just to compare, these are like the ratio of this is Lika and and the other, and Barbie doll and Blight. And the rise of girl heroines in Japan, the rise of female super heroines. Sailor Moon changed magical girl stories and other stories aimed at girls. Where magical girl stories mostly focus on love, romance, and family, Sailor Moon presents girls as independent super heroines that don't need men to protect them. They embrace their femininity and girlhood, but they don't let it entirely define them. So yeah, it speaks for itself. So you already know, like Pink Five, Yellow Four, Sailor Moon, Nana. These characters are like there's their own superheroes at their own merit. And the most important most important part of this history is the kawaii cult revolution, where Sanrio was born. Established as a commercial success, came from the nameless cat coin purse. In So the first product is the coin purse. Again, the ironic part is the founder CEO is a man, but Shintaro Tsugi. A romanticist, grew up in the war era of Japan. So Hello Kitty creator is Sumisu, but the designer now is Yuko Yamaguchi, the one mm, and like, so this is one of the most important part, not important part, but most lucrative part of the kawaii culture, that it became a business. It's not only a trend, it became a multi-million business, a multinational business. um and individualism is so important as well, that like fashion is fashion fashion is dictated by the streets and not by the editor. So Soichi Aoki is the founder, the editor of Roots magazine, that he used to take. I believe he's still taking photos until now, because there was a time that Fruits magazine closed, but this this magazine this magazine is like a fort uh the forefathers of OOTD, the fit check or whatnot, what we call it nowadays. But this one, it's such an observation of the streets of Harajuku, and how they're every Sunday they would excuse me, every Sunday they would be the young the youth of Tokyo would be hanging out in Harajuku trying to be photographed by Soichi Ayuki of Fruits magazine. And just to flex, I had like one of the people that were featured in the cover. I have worked with them personally in Harajuku, so that's just a little flex. So the styles of fashion is continuously growing, super every day, maybe every week there's a new fashion style. Every day there's a new fashion style. And yeah, so hold on, sorry. So the most important part of the culture of the non-belligerent culture is they make statements they make statements through their fashion state. They make statements through their fashion. So one of the, I at least I will give you one example before I wrap it up. um for example, the Gyaru fashion. This is, of course, this is a very non-traditional sense of beauty, and it's very controversial in a way that, like, of course, with the Black Lives Matter, they feel sensitive about, like, coloring and stuff. But the way that they projected their style is a revenge against traditional Japanese society due to resentment of neglect, isolation, and constraint of Japanese society. This is their attempt at individuality, self-expression, and freedom. In open defiance of school standards and regulation, the deep Ganguru Ten is a direct conflict with the traditional Japanese ideas of feminine beauty. Unconsciously tap into the long-standing racial skin color prejudices to settle on darker skin, but their goal was extremely rather than extremely rather than racial reference itself. So instead of like the following the fair skin, light skin beauty, they they celebrated different kind of beauty in coloring or doing their makeup in a different skin tone. And some of the other examples as well, but we don't have time to discuss it. So just the dark kawaii, anti kawaii, it dabbles on, like, you you celebrate and you put things that are not easily talked about, like gore, like suicide, and like suicide, hurt, self-harm. And it's very controversial nowadays, but the point of this kind of style is to put it out there, especially in Japan, that you don't easily talk about things non-confrontational again. But if it's like in your face that you're wearing these things, people can bring it up and have a chance to talk about things. It's not celebrating death. It is just putting it out there to be able to have a chance to talk about these things. And okay. So in the end, sorry, I'm kind of super rushing, but in the end, like the kawaii cult revolution, there is strength. That the main gist of everything is there is strength in softness. The Japan's soft power emanating through kawaii pop culture generated commercially and culturally successful interest throughout the globe. And you can make a statement, you can rebel in a way that's soft and non-belligerent. You don't need to fight anyone. You can make a statement through your clothing, through your art, through the kawaii culture philosophy. Okay. Sorry. Hirap, ang bilis. Okay, is there any questions?
Thank you, Miss Tracy Dizon, for that captivating discussion. We have time to entertain one question from the audience. If
Yeah.
you guys have any questions, do you guys have any questions?
Do you have a question, Kenza?
I have, I don't have a question.
Did you understand my lecture? Sorry, I was trying to make it as fast as I can.
Yeah, miss, we understood it very well. And personally, I was really entertained by it because this is something that I'm sure a lot of the students in this room also are very interested in and like are very well aware of because of pop culture, because kawaii has become a pop culture thing here for a very long time. So yeah, on my end, I was very entertained by it, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you. If you want to see the whole lecture, you can just scan the whole thing. I forgot to like share that part.
Okay, sure, miss, sure, miss. Okay, so now moving on, our third lecture is entitled La Farfa, A Decade of Japan's Marshmallow Girls, presented by Miss Nicole Luna, former professor at De La Salle College of St. Benilde and a current Mexed scholar at Bongka Gakuen University. Please welcome, live in Tokyo, via Zoom, Miss Nicole Luna.
Hi. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I'll try to be as quick as possible since we're behind schedule. So good afternoon. I'm Nicole Luna, and today I'll be presenting about my research or my ongoing research on fat fashion in Japan. So to give you guys a background, when I first came to Japan, I expected 95% of the women here to be slender. And this expectation came from my previous visits where I don't really recall seeing anyone fat or any plus size women. However, during the first few years, not years, first few months I lived here in Tokyo, I tried to be more observant of the people around me, people who I see in trains or walking on the streets, and I realized that there is quite a good number of plus size women here in Japan. And this observation has actually sparked my curiosity on how these women navigate fashion in a world where plus size fashion is nearly non existent. And this curiosity then led me to my main research material, which is Japan's only plus size magazine, La Farfa. So, as you can see on screen, these are three quintessential examples of what a Japanese magazine cover looks like. However, they're also very representative of what a normal fashion or typical fashion magazine. And one can observe three very distinct features. First, you'll have a beautiful actress or model on the cover. So they might not be your ideal face type, but the general consensus would be this person's beautiful. And the second would be that person boasts a very slender body. And third, this slender body is sporting the latest fashion. So here I want to pose a question to all of you. Then where can we see fat bodies in the media? Well, we see them here. In your typical typecasted role of the duff or the designated ugly fat friend or the sporting character best friend who makes the main character look gorgeous or hype her up. Or you also have the gag woman who uses her fat body to humor others. Or the angry old matron we often see in ads who reminds us that being thinner and younger is what we all should aspire to be, or else we'll end up bitter and miserable like her. So here I pose another question. Why can't that fat body be the woman in the magazine we see looking beautiful, sporting the latest fashion? Well, this is what La Farfa represents. So by the what if, the why not, so by presenting the fat body in a fashionable and trendy manner, La Farfa is challenging both the traditional fashion system and its marginalization of the fat body. So interestingly enough, while I was preparing this presentation, La Farfa's latest issue had the tagline "Heroine ni naru," so become a heroine. So it's a high time that we erase being typecast and have a more positive fat body representation be prevalent in media. And because of that, the question for my research, or the primary question I'm asking, is how does La Farfa culturally construct the fat body in Japan through the fashion lens? And in order to answer this question, employed visual and content analysis methods focusing exclusively on the magazine. Although La Forfa is a fashion magazine, it covers topics ranging from fashion, beauty, lifestyle to culture. However, since this specific research investigates the magazine through the fashion perspective, I only examined features content with clothing content and excluding clothing advertisements. My primary objective was to identify patterns and analyze whether La Farfa promotes certain style combinations, or do they employ techniques of figure flattery, which I will discuss later. While images are the primary tool for my research, texts are also considered to understand the overall context and keywords used to describe the clothing. So for my research, I employed two theoretical frameworks. You have first, Mikhail Foucault's theory on discipline power, which explains disciplinary power as a technology that controls, organizes, and amplifies powers of bodies, conditioning individuals to operate collectively and function as productive elements within a broader society. And second, you have Antonio Gramsci's concept of cultural hegemony, which talks about how dominant groups in society maintain control by securing the spontaneous consent over subordinate groups who, in turn, willingly participate in their own oppression. So the dominant groups sustain cultural hegemony by convincing the subordinate groups to adapt their values, convincing them or making them believe that these values are beneficial to them, even though they solely benefit or they primarily serve the interests of the dominant group. So I use Foucault's theory to understand the fashion system, while I use Gramsci's theory to interpret Japan's fat culture. Interestingly enough, both these theories have something in common. So they talk about the idea of consent and collectivism. So throughout this presentation, I want everyone to keep these two factors in mind. You have the fashion system and Japan's culture, as these two factors form the basis in which the fat body in Japan is constructed. So the fashion system is can be thought of as the governing body of quote unquote fashion. And within this system, the general rule is that thin is normal and anything outside of that is considered non-normal. And this is called the slenderness imperative. So utilizing Foucault's theory, we can say, or we can assert, that the fashion system's slenderness imperative makes being thin the natural and idealized form of body representation, while simultaneously denouncing fatness. So in order for them to discipline fat bodies, fashion uses both clothing and media to control, regulate, and punish the fat. The next factor would be Japan's culture. While Japan has integrated Western traits, they have been able to maintain adherence to their indigenous traits. And one of the biggest phenomenon here is collectivism over individualism. So it's not just on like the political or economical dimensions, but also social cultural aspects, which include the concept of the ideal beauty or the ideal body. So using Gramsci's theory will help us understand why fat stigmatization in Japan is so severe, and why the fashion you see inside La Farfa magazine is different from the fashion you see, let's say, in America or in Europe. So I have here photos of 5 women. And I'd like to ask the audience or those in Zoom if you think any of these women are fat. And if you think they're fat, can you guys raise your hand? through in person or through the Zoom emoticon. I can't really see you all, but are there people with hands raised there? Do you think any of these women are fat? Oh, I don't see anyone, so I guess not. These five women are actually Lafarfa's Pochari models, or better known as fat or plus size models. So these women weigh anything between 67 to 90 kilograms, which is actually considered pretty average or slightly chubby by Filipino standards. Um, it's also good to take note that La Farfa's lightest model is only 65 kilograms. And just with that, it gives you an idea of the fat threshold here in Japan. So, in the broader context of Japanese society, being fat is actually considered a nuisance. And you can see that from everything around like the daily life in Japan. For example, transportation here in Japan is not made for fat people. The size of restrooms is not made for fat people, and the most obvious of them all is the size availability of clothing. It's definitely not made for fat people. So the body here in Japan is a whole different dimension that we're not really familiar with. They have their own set of standards and rules, which is different from what we have in the Philippines or what people in Western countries have. However, notably, despite the different thresholds of all these cultures or all these countries, one thing is common amongst all of them is the perpetuation of the slenderness imperative. So thin is in. So despite the continuous fat stigmatization here in Japan, La Farfa magazine endeavors to reduce this negativity through their own fashion approach, and this gave birth to the concept of the marshmallow shoujo, or the marshmallow girl. So historically, they use the terms dekai or debu to derogatorily describe larger bodies. However, La Farfa introduced the more quote unquote endearing marshmallow girl, likening the fat body to a soft, fluffy marshmallow, thus giving a more positive perception to fatness. This actually parallels with how the term plus size evolved, as it was used to replace the derogatory connotation of the word fat. However, in contemporary fat fashion studies, scholars have tried to reclaim the word fat as the empowering descriptor for larger bodies. Now, Lafarfa uses the marshmallow girl concept as one of its signature styles. Basically, it's characterized by sweet and girly type of clothing. So you'd see blouses, sweaters, skirts, often in pastels, laces, and florals. And most of you in the audience are fashion students, I assume, and you guys are familiar with the body shape standardization we commonly use in the industry. So this standardization is the basis for deciding which silhouettes, colors, or sartorial elements best complements each body shape. So this practice is called figure flattery. So the concept of figure flattery is based on the notion that a fat woman should dress in a way that makes herself look thinner or closer to the fashionable ideal, or at the very least aesthetically acceptable. Um and this could be achieved in various through various means, through colors, through patterns, fabrics, lines, cuts, and silhouettes. And style guides and magazines have long employed this technique to quote unquote scientifically teach people how to dress. And this is particularly emphasized in plus size fashion. So as you can see here below, La Farfa has developed their own body standardization with five distinct body shapes. So you have the teddy on the far left. So the teddy is someone who's plump or round all over. You have the usagi, or the rabbit, who has a voluminous lower body. You have the penguin, or the penguin, who has a protruding stomach. You have the poodle, who has a large body but very slender limbs. And last, you have the hato, or the pigeon, who has a voluminous large upper body. So the teddy, the usagi, and the hato all correspond to the Western apple, pear, and inverted triangles. However, the penguin and the poodle are new and distinct body shapes created by Lafarfa. So after gathering data and analyzing these data, it shows that Lafarfa does not really prioritize figure flattery in its fashion practice. For example, figure flattery advises against wearing loose, baggy clothing as it makes you look larger. And as you can see in the model on the leftmost side, she's wearing such clothing, and even worse, she's wearing it in bright colors, which are deemed fattening. The model next to it is wearing a lavender sweater with a pink fit and flare skirt, which and this is an example that really emphasizes Lafarfa's emphasis on color. So each issue would have a feature on how to mix and combine colors, with very few instances of seeing all dark or all black looks, unless the theme is about that. Moreover, figure flattery suggests that fat women accentuate their best features, which are usually the cleavage, the bosom, and or the slimmest part of their body. And as you can see in the middle figure, Lafarfa does not stress on that. Lafarfa actually likes to layer clothing, and they very rarely show skin or emphasize the curves. And this reflects the Japanese sartorial trait of not showing skin, especially the cleavage, because it's a bit taboo. And this is especially for fatter women because they're judged using different standards. Next, you have the horizontal stripes, which is a figure flattery taboo. It's a big no-no in figure flattery. However, the Farfa has been promoting this horizontal stripe look since its birth in 2013. So it's called borders in Japan. It's considered a closet staple here. And lastly, La Farfa does not put emphasis on the elongation principle, which aims to create the illusion of height and a slimmer body through the proper proportioning. As you can see on the model on the rightmost side, this is an example of a poorly executed proportioning, as it shortens the legs and lengthens the abdomen, which is contrary to figure flattery rules. So, but I would like to point out that Lafarfa does sometimes follow figure flattery, especially when it comes to features about body standardization we all saw in the previous slide. However, figure flattery in Lafarfa is pretty subtle, as can be seen in the examples I've shown. So by not adhering to figure flattery practices, Lafarfa can actually be seen as challenging the conventional rules of the fashion system through their own fashion practice. And this deviation can be or may be a result of Lafarfa trying to align with general trends in Japan, which does not necessarily conform to figure flattery. And as can be seen, Lafarfa developed their own body standardization interpretations, which can be seen as still operating within the broader fashion system framework. So in essence, Lafarfa's trying to strike a balance between following established fashion rules while not completely conforming to it. And at the same time, they try to incorporate Japanese sartorial traits in order to better integrate into society. So nonetheless, Lafarfa acts as a form of resistance against the dominant power structures in fashion, and advocates for recognition and celebration of fat bodies in Japanese culture. As I mentioned before, this is still an ongoing research, so there are a lot more to tackle. But I won't tackle them today. So thank you. I'm sorry if I like rushed through it. But we're very behind in time. For those who have questions regarding my presentation, you guys all know me or probably know me. So you have my email. I request that you just email me your questions and I will definitely answer everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Nikki, for that intriguing and insightful presentation. Now, our next lecture, entitled Craft Consuming Redesigned, innovating traditional textile craft mediums to attract a new segmented consumer base, will be delivered by Miss Diana Katigbak. She has an MA in Science of Clothing at Bunka Gakuin University and is currently a natural dye artist and professor at De La Salle College of St. Benil. Let's all welcome Miss DK.
Thank you for the warm welcome, everyone. Okay, I hope you learned something today in preparation for what you guys are about to take on in your FDM journeys. And also, hello to the GFC group. It's so nice to present in my alma mater, Professor Takagi and Professor Saskia. Thank you. Okay. And thank you, Nikki, for inviting me in this lecture. So, I'm here to present to you my master's research conducted in the years 2018 through 2019 that focuses on the process of product conceptualization and promotion of traditional textile craft mediums to encourage market consumption entitled Craft Consuming Redesign. So next slide, please. Okay, so growing up in Manila, I'm mostly exposed to the bustling city life. And any big city, it's a place with multicultural influences that have lasted throughout its history. Though being the capital, Manila, many say that the whole culture of the Philippines cannot be justified by just experiencing it here. Next slide. Partly true because the Philippines has so much more to offer outside the city. And cultures differ from region to region with their own story to tell and experiences waiting to be explored. Next slide, please. Currently, there's an increasing interest in culture consumption in the Philippines. There has been a growth in heritage experiences and travel, art and indigenous culture events, and more importantly, several new local brands offer modern products that tell the story of the regions of the Philippines through craftsmanship. In relevant global fashion news, okay, luxury shoe designer Christian Louboutin was even inspired by the Philippine culture and produced his limited edition bag, Manila Caba, in 2018. And this could be seen as a sign that the cultural revival is well on the rise for Philippine made and heritage inspired products. My interest in textile mediums came from my exposure to the many varieties of natural fiber materials and dye yielding plants native to our country. Just click. Ah, yeah. Okay, so one of the most popular textile craft products we have in the Philippines is the piña textile, a fine but durable cloth made from the fibers of the outer pineapple plant leaves. And with the growing interest in commercial sustainability and culture consumption in the Philippines, I believe that the piña product could be made and developed into such a product. Next slide, please. So for this reason, I have found out that Japan and Tokyo in particular, because of consumer awareness and the help of government-initiated projects, has a living presence of traditional craft practice and tradition-rooted retail brands that can be useful to advance the piñal textile crafts of the Philippines. So my research has led me to focus into the craft of indigo dyeing and piña textile. Both of these crafts were acquired from overseas influence and have become a significant part of each country's culture through modernity. With the growing community of new indigo brands and craftsmen in Japan that gain attention from global consumers, as you can see here, this phenomenon is an ideal benchmark for modern craftsmanship. Okay, next slide, please. So among the many traditional textile crafts in Japan, indigo dyeing is a craft that had greatly evolved in image, technique, and aesthetic. Going far from its common Edo period image, where we often see kimonos and yukatas designed with indigo, contemporary brands in Tokyo have extended its potential to Western clothing, creating a modern aesthetic to the medium. Similarly, the use of piña textile was locally imposed luxury consumption driven by young, independent designers that present youthful options and modern takes on Pina textile-based apparel. Seeing this disparity led me to my research question. Next slide, please. How can we create a new consumer base for textile craft mediums in the present day? Next slide, please. With this question in mind, I look into the masses and companies' theoretical framework of innovation through tradition, which makes use of the process of interiorization and reinterpretation as a means of developing modern products from traditional knowledge. Apart from the indigo brands that I've seen in Tokyo, this process is uniquely embodied in the work of Studio Tatsumiki. So here is one of his displays in Sutaya. Okay, is a contemporary indigo dyer based in Shibuya, Tokyo, which I have come to work with under an apprenticeship and observe his modern approach in practicing his craft. Next slide, please. So with the intention to gather my data through participant observation, I worked on a variety of activities oriented in making and knowledge sharing. His consumers in three different levels. In his practice, he has three segments that reflect the value, perception, and acceptance of his products. Next slide, please. So the first is the luxury consumer. So these are the consumers that appreciate the artistic value of his limited produced sustainable scarves. So these are the scarves here, as you can see. So this product is made with the traditional method of indigo dyeing. So it has a range of different colors. And also the yarns he used is hatched silk. So it's a sustainable scarf. So as you may not know, silk is made through boiling cocoons, which may not be as sustainable as you sacrifice the life of the animal. But through the unique process of using hatched cocoons, there's an aesthetic to the feel and the kind of fibers we have, okay, and enhanced by the application of the indigo dye. So this product has merited recognition from the Wonder 500 Cool Japan project by the Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry, and attained the luxury status. So we can stay on the slide, please. The second is the information savvy consumer that learns to appreciate his products through knowledge sharing by hosting workshops. So these consumers learn to appreciate the products, and through the knowing more about the indigo, basically. And that's a gateway for them to be able to understand the craft. And lastly, we have is the experience-oriented consumer, okay, that engages with his blue dyeing service, okay, in having a first-hand feel of wearing the benefits of indigo dye on clothing. So what we do in the service is that the customer provides the clothes and then we dye it for them. So it's like a renewed look to any garment or item that you provide. So these three segments basically engage the consumer in different levels of appreciation that creates a higher interest for his products. So with this framework, I decided to apply this to modernize Pina textile apparel. Next slide, please. To modernize the Pina textile as a product, I thought to push the development of the textile further and explore also take consideration its demographic and designing a product that can expand the interest to the millennial market and change the misconceptions about wearing piña. With my research, I applied the innovation through tradition process of interiorization and reinterpretation to come up with a new take on designing with piña. Next slide. Throughout history and through this day, piña clothing was always perceived as luxurious and elite. Only those affluent could afford and only to be worn on special occasions. With this notion, it has limited its reputation to this day to formal wear. And this is why, with my collection, I thought to mix in more familiar and relatable elements to encourage the market and designers alike to rethink its potential into modern casual wear. Next slide, please. So, with this, I look into the lifestyle of Manileños or Filipinos and my own experiences of Manila and what I have in common with everyone. So the memories that stand out to me is the lively vibrance of the city, the cheerfulness of the people, and the diverse array of colors that cover the streets. Next slide, please. So one of the most iconic of this essence is the jeepney, a version of our own local bus privately owned by its driver. And it's seen as a symbol of independence and pride to own. Because of this, excuse me. Because of this, the owners decorate their jeepneys to display words, themes, images, and um, anything they like that inspires them. And in a sense, it's an art form that reflects the personality of its owner. The more decorative, the better. Very maximalist. And every person, I believe, who has visited the Philippines remember this city icon as it's the strongest reflection of its people and culture. So I analyzed the elements, translating iconography and aesthetic qualities into my collection. Next slide. The interiorization and reinterpretation process is translated into the exploration of surface treatment and material design. I wanted to achieve a combination of a traditional and modern technique. So then I developed a combination of applying indigo dyeing by hand and digital sublimation printing. I also made use of modern fabrics like cotton knits and denim as complementary textiles, okay, and PVC for detailing. The collection aims to propagate the use of the material by other designers in the Philippines by exploring various textile design methods and styling. Next slide, please. Using the framework, I designed my collection using updated basic silhouettes to balance out the new and traditional elements into ready to wear apparel. And yet, to further introduce the concept to the local market, a global perspective is also a useful tool to create impact. Because of this, I have conceptualized my photo shoot to juxtapose the local icons of Filipino culture with the city of Tokyo in the background to project the idea of our icons and culture can blend in with others just as well. From one city culture to another, slightly different yet harmonious in one image, this theme resonates as a we click through the next few photos of the collection. So next slide, please. So this is look one and look two, 3 and 4. So I also wanted to highlight accessories came with it. So I also dyed so this is abaca slippers that I formed plugs for and then used PVC as detailing. So basically this detail I used the PVC because we see the flashy signs and that was the link to the jeepneys design wise. Okay, next slide please. So what you see here is not just the plain piña. This the sheer tops are made of piña and dyed and printed, and this is also piña and silk. Okay. So next slide. Okay. So other looks were reinterpreted. So we just mix and match the pieces. Next slide. Next slide. So this is shot in Enoshima. So a different background naman, but still inside Tokyo. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So after the completion of the research project, looks from the collection have been published in Vogue Italia's Photo Vogue, okay, affirming the theoretical framework and practice. Through reinterpretation of the styling, pieces of the collection can be versatile and gender neutral. Let's click through. Next. Next. Ayan. Okay. So this ends my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss DK. Do you guys have any questions? We can entertain one. Come on. You were on time, actually. Yeah. That's my question. Okay, any questions? Planning, conceptualizing, the group discussion. Hey, there we go. Hey.
So, hello, miss. So, like, I was wondering if, like, what was your Japanese professors like intel on your thesis? Parang like, were they impressed? Like, on how like how I guess versatile you Filipino like textiles or like how versatile they are in like dyeing like ganun miss.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, because the fashion professors in Japan are quite versed with, the street styles and all. What I did was, first of all, I really like scoured through Shibuya, Roppongi, and all the shopping streets, and also Ginza for the labels that handle indigo. So I saw how they made their collections. If you can see the slides of the brands I featured there, those are the um, what do you call that? Benchmarks of how they approach traditional craft in modern clothing. So that was my whole idea in creating the collection. To them, of course, it's unique to find pinya fabric. It's actually one mostly their first time to actually see pinya fabric. So usually their notions were just like still way back, Imelda time na, with the butterfly, what Philippine fashion was like. So with that, I think it opened their minds to what materials we have, and with the application of the indigo dye, they were quite refreshed, especially with the shoes were actually a hit to them. So with that, they saw the versatility of indigo, and thankfully we also have indigo here in the Philippines, so which makes the research very much linked and relevant to our culture. Yeah. Okay. So hope I answered the question.
Thank you, Miss. Thank you for that question.
So, our final lecture is Fashion Forward, the future of Japanese Filipino fashion collaborations, presented by Dr. Carl Ian Cheng Chua, who has a PhD in social sciences at Hitotsubashi University and is a member of the steering committee on Japanese Studies Association in Southeast Asia. He is a professor at the University of the Philippines and formerly at Ateneo de Manila University, and is one of the most esteemed historians and academicians specializing in Japan. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Carl Ian Cheng Chua.
Great. First and foremost, thank you for the invitation. Secondly, like the other speakers, I might be rushing because I prepared for 30, but we'll see how this chaos will work. Um, so first and for next slide, please. So basically, I'm dealing with cosplay, but it's not cosplay itself. The first thing we work with is the idea that cosplay seems to be a very Japanese-oriented concept, but the reality is it began in 1984, and they actually got it from the Americans who were not actually dressing like what we imagine cosplay right now, but rather it's the sci-fi fiction cosplay. to which it was reported in LA Con. And that's when they said, like, what is this phenomena? Let's call it costume play, and then contracted it into cosplay. Next slide, please. So just a couple of scenes. So at least you get a historical idea of where it actually comes from. And we don't essentialize Japan as being the origins of all of these cool things. Next slide, please. All right. Furthermore, the idea of dressing up is not unique to Japan itself. Culturally, you already have a lot of countries that have certain practices that also dressed up, right? Not only in Europe, but also in South America, and even within the Philippine setting itself. So, in other words, what we try to look at is to deconstruct the idea of this being just essentially Japanese and allows us to now accept the culture as it is because it's not foreign, but rather it's familiar. Next slide. So this is 7 minutes. We'll just run through it. So just give you an idea of what cosplay is. This is the 2023 World Cosplay Competition. Try to observe the cosplayers and what they're wearing. There will be halfway through. These are the national contestants. So can you play? 2022 pala. Though this is post-pandemic. Okay. I think we can stop there kasi mga random cosplayers na lang ito. Thank you. So the idea here is just to get you a feel of what cosplay is and who this big competition is for. Why did they feature World Cosplay Summit? Because it's sort of like the legitimacy factor to people who cosplay, right? If you win in this competition, then you're like, wow. And this is just the history of all of it. But something that we have to understand here is that This is not cool Japan. It only, while it did begin in 2003, it's only in 2006 when government actually intervened, which means like it's a typical Japan thing where it's the fans that have actually created it. And when the Japanese government saw it, like, oh, that's interesting. Let's just invest in it. The Philippines only officially joins in 2013. And what becomes interesting is in 2023, through some form of politics. It's the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia that hosts the next cosplay summit. Ayan, thanks. Next slide, please. So the idea here is, of course, we question why we cosplay. It's similar to, I think, the kawaii concept. The idea there is when you look at the cosplayer contestants, and it's also related to what Nicole has also mentioned. We're not looking at prescribing body types, so anything is possible. You can crossplay. You can do whatever. There are no limitations because of the explanation, because of the potentials of cosplay itself. However, I will problematize this with next slide. The idea here is we tend to think of it as soft power, right? That we are being influenced by Japan. It's related to the previous speakers as well. But we question it further that we are not just passive recipients, but we have to be active interveners into the culture itself. In other words, we're not just accepting the culture. We should also be manipulating the culture as well. Next slide. And that's where the research of a friend in Indonesia comes in. She was working with hijab cosplay. And this already creates a very problematic concept because when you think about cosplay, you're not supposed to add another adjective before it. Because the moment that you add an adjective before it, you're now changing or you're saying that this is different from cosplay, right? And that's part of the problem that I wanted to present. And if you want to see it, then there's this website. Next slide. Um, so what you see here as their definitions of hijab cosplay is to have women engage in cosplay but are within the realms of but these are basically Muslims. And what becomes fascinating about this is that it's actually limited to the gender of women. So male cosplayers, you don't call them hijab cosplayers, you just call them cosplayers. But for women, it seems to have pushed this idea that you have to be a hijab cosplayer, right? So it then creates a lot of gender issues within this realm. So much so that the religion has a lot of, next slide, a lot of interesting nuances. So for those that are not able to understand what they are or what they do, so yeah, diba? These are just examples. Next slide. There are plenty of arguments from the religion regarding hijab cosplay. Next slide. So, of course, religion will always have some of its own definitions. What you're not supposed to do, especially since you're now garnishing this religious or cultural practice. Next slide. So there will be a lot of there will be, memes and so on defining how you're supposed to wear it. And remember that these are definitions towards the woman's body and the woman's fashion, right? And so on. So next slide. So how does hijab cosplay then work? There are several definitions here. This is still part of her research. Shari style means that they still look at it as a religious practice, which means that when they're wearing it, they're saying that they're proudly Muslim, and they are saying that as Muslims, we can then practice in this subculture, right? Next slide. Then, and of course, you have the various forms of hijabis, particularly niqab, which is the full cover, which allows them to cosplay as well. But the last one, next slide, is stylish style, which means that you look at this practice not from a religious perspective, but rather a cultural thing. In other words, you're not looking at wearing the hijab as something that you need to do as a religious practice, but because you've just been wearing it since you were young, right? However, there are stipulations to this, and this is where my friend's research comes in. Ends, and that's where I had sort of a problem because it simply limits the idea of okay, we now see this phenomenon in Muslim countries or countries that have Muslim dominated religions. But how does it then reflect Japan, right? So next slide. So for me, while we're understanding the local issues of hijab cosplay, we have to also look at how it then influences major cosplay itself. And if you notice in the competition, incidentally, if you follow it in YouTube, there have been no hijabi cosplayers competing at all, right? In the in the world competition. Next slide. So, and how am I now defining this? Why can't they compete? Right. And that's where part of the problem is. Because when you then look at it, cosplay is not just about looking the look, but actually designing your costumes, designing your entire thing. And when we then do research on hijab cosplay, we are now seeing a lot of what we would call crafting, right? How they're able to manipulate their hijab to mimic wigs. And you'll have lots of tutorials for it. You would also have how they then manipulate their costumes, particularly in their situation, they cannot do sexy styles. There should not be a lot of flesh that should be shown. So how do you interpret, let's say, Madoka Magica without, being short skirted? How do you do Hatsune Miku? Within the realms and stipulations of hijabi. So in other words, there is a lot of thought and crafting that's involved. Next slide. So I'm pushing the idea that yeah, you can it's a craft concept. But so in one aspect, knowing that this is a craft concept, and this is related to I think one of the questions on cultural appropriation, can non-hijabi then hijab cosplay? And even the hijab cosplayer says, sure, why not? Because you're no longer looking at it as you're not looking at it within the realms of negatively objectifying the culture, but it's similar to people wearing a kimono. It's similar to people wearing, the barat saya because you wanted to feel the culture itself. And that's why it's supposed to be okay as long as you work with it in a respectable way. Then we then throw the competition itself. Next slide. So can hijab cosplayers win in a world cosplay summit? And that's where a major problem comes in, right? Because what we're trying to then do is these are cultural devices that have now popped up grassroots. You cannot just ignore them simply because they look different. Rather, you're supposed to then look at them within this creative interpretation of a cultural issue, right, that they had. And when we look at the criteria of World Cosplay Summit, how is a winner supposed to be determined? Handmade costume, check, right? Costume must play Japanese anime, manga, tokusatsu, check, right? Stage performance, sure, they can perform, right? Background screen, ranking is determined by total score. So in other words, there's no limitation here. There's nothing here that prevents you from actually performing or even competing. Next slide. We also have a judges' criterion, costume precision. Probably that's where you'll have some points deducted. But that's not the only issue, right? Because cross playing can also deduct points in terms of costume precision, costume quality, and technique, right? Stage judging is just basically the performance. So next slide. Um, so where am I now working with this? This is then where we have the issue of the local cosplay scenes. So much so that if someone, let's say your friend who is Muslim is now cosplaying and enters the competition, there seems to be not a Japan, but rather a local hesitation of pushing these people who have experimented and creatively defined their cosplay to make them win outside of cosplay competitions, right? So in other words, it's nothing racial, it's nothing about we don't like Muslims in this picture and so on, but rather there's also that idea, they look different from the mainstream cosplayers, right? So much so that we have to then change our mindsets in order to allow these experimentations from happening. A final example that I have here is once again how we see these local practices of us sort of separating, right? Separating cultures. In the last Philippine Book Festival, they did this cosplay Filipiniana, which means that they're now putting it within the space that cosplay your favorite Filipino character. But to me, why label it as Filipiniana when it's basically cosplay, right? Um, because what happens here is once again you're separating this idea rather than making the culture, making Japan or making the world recognize that hey, we have this comic artist, we have this comic characters. Why can't we perform it, right? Particularly when its historical lens began not as a Japanese practice, but rather as a global practice altogether. So it's sort of like a thought problematic process that we can sort of challenge, especially since for your cases as fashion students, not only are you then looking at the idea of experimenting looks, but it's also experimenting, mga costumes. Dude. It's sort of related to yung mga Mr. Universe or mga Miss Universe costumes itself, where when you actually look at it, and the sad thing here is there seems to be patterns that people are just copying, right? Year after year, rather than actually engaging in the creator's creativity to push this and say, we can change this fashion. And I think that's it. Yes, there. So if you want more on the video, don't worry. Everything is in YouTube. So if you search for it, all of these MTVs are there. And even the slides are there. So if you have questions, feel free to ask. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Carl, for that fascinating presentation. Do you guys have any questions to ask Dr. Carl?
Conceptualizing the question. Okay. So I have been given the permission to call someone's name. So I will call, oh my, miss, I don't know their names. I will call Miss Jillian Ngo, who is seated there.
I actually don't have any questions, but I found that really insightful. It's interesting to think like like soft power and how that intersects with something that you would see as like harmless as an expression of creativity. So I found that really interesting and especially hadn't thought about it in the context of hijabi cosplayers as well. So I have nothing to say. I have no questions rather to ask, but thank you for the talk. It was very interesting.
Okay. Let's call on one more because I feel like this group here is very immersed with each other. Okay, he is making a question. He is still conceptualizing.
Yeah. So, sir, go.
Hello, thank you for very concise presentation. I just have a question about kasi soft power, and then you were kind of questioning about how if you're going to put an adjective or a word before the word cosplay, then it kind of interacts with it. Pero you also mentioned na parang why do you have to include the word Filipiniana in the word cosplay itself? So I thought you were advocating for an interaction of non-Japanese cosplayers with the supposedly Japanese, which is hindi naman talaga, na practice of cosplay, and yet you are questioning the use of the word Filipina, isn't that how interaction, or is it because you don't really subscribe to us or to Filipinos using the word cosplay? Because as you mentioned, we have been doing that even before the word cosplay was invented.
Thanks. Yeah. Bear with this. It's sort of like linguistic verbiage, right? It's the same thing with the previous speaker's presentation, diba? You don't say I'm doing ancient Filipino dyeing of indigo, right? It's really the idea that there is already a global phenomena of indigo dyeing and indigo manipulation. So much so that you just enter in that space and say, I'm participating in this cultural craft, right? I'm using piña, which no one else is using. So you don't label it as Filipino anymore, but you're now engaging in that cultural concept. Um, while it's also nice to say that sige, it's hijab cosplay or it's kiss cosplay Filipiniana, what it then does is it sort of creates that line na they're doing cosplay, I'm not. I'm doing Filipiniana cosplay. And from a cultural perspective, parang when you then create that it's sort of like labeling, right? You're saying that this is something that that other culture does not have, right? But it's really about how the people use it. On my end, kasi, if we're looking at cosplay, Japan as the cosplay origins, as most cosplayers do, it's also about disrupting that origins and saying that it's no longer a Japan culture, but rather it's already a global culture. So, because Japan does not label it as Japanese cosplay, yet if you notice from World Cosplay Summit, they specify that you can only do Japanese characters. Diba? As opposed to we can do so many other cosplays, right? So it's still a challenge, and it's something that I'm not insisting we have to do, but it's just like a dilemma that we can think about.
Thank you. Um, we're kind of short. Is it okay if let me ask you after this? Okay. If you have other questions, you may ask him. You may ask Doctor after the session. So now we move to our discussion part, where we invited two Japanese academics to comment on the lectures we just heard. Please help me in welcoming Ozeki Erino Sensei, who is now live in Tokyo, and Suji Takashi Sensei, who has sent in a recording. Let's begin with Suji Sensei's video commentary. Thank you.
Good day, everybody. My name is Takashi Tsuji, and I work as an associate fellow at ILCI. I am interested in commenting on a presentation given by Mr. Carl Chua. Despite my desire to comment specifically on site, let me create a video presentation. Before beginning my comment, I want to briefly introduce myself. First, I want to share with you about IRCI. IRCI is a UNESCO Category 2 center located in Osaka, Japan, researching intangible cultural heritage, or ICH, specifically in the Asia Pacific region. Fashion is a part of ICH as well. It would be great if you were interested in fashion and ICH. For the past 30 years, I have been a specialist in ecological anthropology, focusing on researching indigenous subsistence activities, food culture, and folklore in the Philippines. My comment is derived from an anthropological perspective. Let's move on to my comment. The hijab is a significant symbol for Muslim women worldwide. It identifies Muslims and shows their authenticity under Islamic doctrine. It's also a political and feminist object with conflicts in the world. To focus on hijab will lead to an appropriate understanding of women in the Islamic world. There are different meanings associated with wearing a hijab. Basically, it's a custom among Muslim women. It's considered that wearing hijab is a practice in everyday life. The norm may not always be strictly followed. In the Philippine context, Muslim women who are related to business tend to wear hijab. On the contrary, women who work in agriculture do not wear hijab because it's not comfortable. Fashion relates to function in sociological and ecological environments. It's obvious that the hijab has a religious significance. Women who pray at the mosque are required to wear it. Refusing to wear a hijab is anti-religious and against the social order. Fashion not only promotes social and cultural harmony, but also enforces sanctions. Hijab is a fashion item as well. Women can choose the one they want to wear. The hijab is both religious and fashionable. Women can enjoy beauty by wearing a hijab as a fashion. Muslim women are granted this privilege. For Muslim women, the hijab is a combination of manners, religious elements, and fashion. Carl's presentation is distinctive in that he developed a concept that went beyond the traditional definition of hijab and even challenged it. He focused on the fact that beside the religious practice of the hijab, the entertainment aspect of the hijab has become associated with it. He has a keen eye for the hijab, which he perceives as more than just religious, but also as having value in terms of kawaii and otaku. The connection between the hijab and art is also suggestive, as it prompts us to question the artistic value of the hijab. It's important to take special care when entertaining religion by linking hijab and cosplay. The most bold believers may be offended by it, and their beliefs may be desecrated. I would like to give some feedback on this presentation. It wasn't clear to me from his PowerPoint why he concentrated on hijab and cosplay. It's important to clarify if the fusion of cosplay and hijab is seen favorably by Muslims worldwide. I would like to ask about the academic basis of this study. He must express his basic knowledge and views as a Filipino on what the hijab is, and the conceptualization of it in the context of the Philippines and Filipinos. I would like to ask if this study is derived from the findings of fieldwork among Filipino Muslims. It's probable that the answer is no. I frequently inquire about this matter with Filipino anthropologists, and I have always felt disappointed that many Filipino researchers do not engage in field of science with their own feet and ideas. As a result, I point out that this presentation lacks human understanding and a field science perspective. I want to emphasize that this is also a critique of other Filipino researchers. Everyday life can be transformed into an extraordinary time and space by fashion, just like cosplay. From what I have observed, Filipinos have a strong linking for parades where they wear colorful masks and costumes. Cosplay is a popular hobby among Filipinos in this regard. This custom is a temporary way to escape and take a break from the daily inconveniences. It's possible that this is tied to the Spanish's colonial policies, which ruled the Filipinos for a long time. It's important to consider why Filipinos engage in this kind of cosplay, as well as their indigenous mindset. To conclude this comment, I would like to highlight some points that I would like the participant to consider. What is the reason behind the popularity of cosplay among Filipinos? What Filipino cultural notions are connected to cosplay? What is the significance of wearing ethnic costumes in Filipino culture today? It's important to consider indigenous fashion in terms of cosplay. It's crucial for participants to acquire a deeper understanding of vernacular fashion as an art. I want to show my gratitude for Carl's presentation, which demonstrates the connection between art and fashion through otaku culture. The elucidation of human creativity from anthropological viewpoint is greatly aided by this interesting theme. That is all. Thank you for your attention.
Hi. So before we move forward with Arena Sensei's
Good day.
section, we would like to ask Sir Carl if he would want to answer the questions or the comments made by um, Takashi Sensei.
Very briefly, it's important to actually what she mentioned, right? But as a background, I'm a historian, so I don't deal with live people. But the idea here is part of the issue why I actually focus on I focused more on um Indonesians and Malaysians because part of how I was looking at it is within their cultures they are a Muslim majority as opposed to the Filipinos. But what I also then observe in the cosplay communities is I've never seen Filipino cosplay Muslim women cosplay in the Philippines. And that now creates this challenge of why aren't they? Are they not doing it simply because it's not part of what they understand it to be, right? But at the same time, it's sighing for the youth, right? Because it's about engaging in this youth culture, which sort of prevents them from doing this, whatever that is. Furthermore, it's also a gender issue in the sense that Muslim men Muslim Filipino men can do it, but Muslim Filipino women may have reasons why they aren't, right? And you want to sort of push that idea. Um, the one of the interesting pictures that Sensei actually mentioned there was the if you look at Filipino Muslim women, they also are quite different in the way they interpret their own fashion, diba? They're not as conservative as our Malaysian and Indonesian friends, right? Which then tells you that there's already this hybridity in the way that they are now looking at their fashions. They are Filipinos who are then dressing similar to you, right? But they just have their hijab, right? So then that question is like, while the students here, especially the girls here, women here, have the potential to I can cosplay, then the question is, can do these girls or do these women have that also question in their mind? So it's sort of like pushing that idea. On that, I do recognize Sensei's criticism of field work because I don't do field work. I let other people do the field work for me. But thanks.
Thank you, Sir Carl, and thank you, Tsuji Sensei. Let us now welcome Ozeki Arena Sensei, a cultural anthropologist and professor at Osaka International University. She is currently studying about the Philippine textiles, specifically the pinya. And yeah, the floor is now yours, Ozeki Sensei.
Yes, thank you. My name is Erino Zeki, and I'd like to express my gratitude to Professor Nicole Luna and Professor Saskia Tolle and all the presenters. Thank you very much. And if you are expecting me to talk something about something very academic, I might disappoint you because I'm just a humble student of Pinia. I fell in love with your Philippine textile Pinia about 30 years ago. And ever since I have visited the Philippines, at least I'm trying to visit the Philippines at least once a year during my summer holidays. And through my experience, I know something, not just the research, but I also try to support the local industry by trying to develop the Japanese market for piña and abaca and their handloom weaving. And since today's presentation's common theme is Filipino people's view of Japanese art, fashion, and culture, so maybe I can provide you with a pairing perspective from the opposite side, a Japanese view of Philippine culture and weaves. But unfortunately, we don't have much time. So yes, instead of talking much about myself, I just like to point out some important discussions or what issues in your presentations and maybe raise related questions that might help deepen our understanding. Okay. Um, uh, Through my experience, I actually developed a particular type of weave of piña for Japanese market. It was successful as a weave, but it was so costly, and it was very difficult for us to support the production. But well, upon request, we can still produce it. The PDS feature is very transparent, light, and it's good. But sometimes there are slips because it's not loosely woven, but it's the characteristic of piña. When it's plain weave, the thread moves. We call it slip. And Japanese people don't like to show their skins too much, like Nicole Sensei just said in her presentation. And so I just used two strands together, not twisted. So we call it double strand weaves, so that we don't have to show too much of our skin. That was my invention. I call it invention. That was very successful, and I'd like to repeat it again sometime. Although we need more material because it's double sun, so we have to consume double of the piña fibers. Yes. Anyway, that's my one experiment, and I tried to sell the Philippine piña and abaca to the Japanese market. As a result, in short, long story short, I have found two major companies in Kyoto. They become very loyal buyers of piña and abaca. After many decades, they still stay very loyal buyers. And but it was very difficult for us to find suitable buyers because it's because of the difference between the business practices between the Philippines and Japan. And aside from that, the demanding level of quality control by the Japanese company was beyond the imagination of the ordinary Filipino people. So that was one reason. It was very difficult for them to meet up with the demanding quality. But anyway, through my experience, I think I'm very interested in Professor Katikbag's project on piña with a combination of Japanese indigo. But I understand that Filipino designer like Batiste Soro used to experiment on natural dyes back in 1980s, and she did a very extensive dye book, and in that book, dye indigo was included. And I know that local manufacturers have already experimented on indigo. So indigo itself is nothing new to you, right? But since you found this very special studio in Tokyo, I'd like to ask you again, what is so special about their project? I mean, their works. Just the design and just like you said, the friendliness to the ecology. And I'd like to ask you one question. Since ordinary people think piña is very expensive, and if you have a piña baron or piña dress, people think you have to have a domestic helper to take care of it because you just cannot put it in the washing machine and wash it and dry it, hang it, and wear it. So that's, if you want to develop a new market, either in Japan or in the Philippines, especially in the Philippines among the young generation, they want to feel that it's easier for them to take care of their costume. So how do you deal with this problem? That is my one question to Professor Katipak. You can answer it later. And let me proceed to some other people. And for Professor Luna, concerning new fashion trend, your presentation about marshmallow girl phenomenon is in the magazine La Farfa in Japan shows a significant change in the perspective of young women's beauty. I think that's very important. And interestingly, analytical types of fat body shapes are more numerous than those of Western countries. This may explain how Japanese people are more concerned about being fat as shameful. The evaluation of fat body in Japan would not have happened without the influence of Western countries' trend, where over slim fashion models are criticized as a symbol of an unnatural human body that drives young girls to unhealthy, unnecessary, harsh diet. This is also related to the worldwide moral trend, including as many different people as possible. So my question to Professor Luna is, how do you see this positive perception of women's fat bodies unfold in the future? Do you think it will eventually change people's prejudice against fat women in Japan? Or if the inclusive moral value is challenged by increasing intolerance that seems loom eerily against inclusion in the world, right now, would it cause the relatively newborn aesthetic concept of the cute marshmallow girl to fade away? I'd like to know your opinion. And for Miss Tracy Deason, I'm so impressed by your thorough research study on kawaii in Japanese. Um, um, it reveals how deeply Japanese people take this aesthetic standard into their mind and society. And I'd like to ask you one question. We understand during the 1960s when Audrey Hepburn appeared in cinema, in Western countries, people said, wow, that was a big change to the traditional Western value towards women, that Marilyn Monroe-like women, adult, mature woman is good. They used to think that this woman is a model, ideal. But when Audrey Hepburn appeared, she blew it away. Do you think there's a kawaii culture also in Western concept? That is my question to you. And finally, is it Professor, sorry, Vicente Tan, is it? Yes, I'm sorry. I have to confess that I, I have minimal knowledge about wartime art, let alone paintings. I only know that I'm one of the fans of Fujita Tsuguharu, and I understand he regretted that he cooperated with the military governments during the war, and how he spent the uh, after war days. It's kind of interesting. He looks like what that? Yes. He couldn't stand blaming himself and struggled for a long time with a kind of pang of deep guilt. And his final years works near his death are paintings that symbolize his desire for Christian salvation. That's very sad, and in a sense, it's very interesting. Thank you very much. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ozeki Sensei. We would like to call on Miss DK to answer one of the questions that were asked.
Her.
Hello. Hello, Sensei. Okay, thank you for your question. And I'm so happy to have another co-researcher interested in the same things I am in textiles. Yeah, so to answer the first question, I found Studio Tatsumiki to be interesting. Because first and foremost, indigo dyeing is the traditional isome is really centered in Tokushima Prefecture. So that's the really traditional source and in the way they make it. Studio Tatsumiki, in his years of experience, before he wasn't really a creative, but he was a public servant turned creative. He was assigned as a government employee in Tokushima. This is where his family is from. And through that, he learned the traditional process of indigo dyeing from the craftsmen there. And to this day, he also sources his indigo in Tokushima. But he practices in Tokyo now, where he grew up and where he's really based in. So, in addition to that, like what he makes with this indigo is sustainable products or services as well, which I think is a new approach than just making clothes. So not he's one of the few who really shares about the source in itself. He's very transparent. I saw that um, other labels would, in the retail space in Japan that cater to or market themselves as indigo brands, they're not so transparent. They just say it's isome. But with the studio Tatsumiki, his practice, he really involves um, his his customer or his audience into the craft itself. So I think that was the most unique thing, that it's just not you dyeing fabrics yourself, but he also, like in my slides, as you can see, he presents different comparisons of indigo types. So even not one indigo farmer is the same. So that's how I learned from him. Not one pigment from each region of the world is the same. So the balance of his knowledge of traditional indigo and also global indigo and how they are similar or also different, the advantages and disadvantages was very significant in his practice, and it shows in the way he creates his products. Yeah. Yeah, and for the second question, yeah, we all have a notion, and we all recognize that till this day, I think it's a systemic problem where a challenge also to the upkeep and development of pinya textiles. So that is one thing I recognize, and also I have considered while designing the collection. Um, as we all know, pinya until this day is still largely handmade from fiber to fabric. And that that contributes to the delicateness of the fabric and also its uniqueness. So the process is still not mechanized. But that I know, I acknowledge that the costs of it due to that production process makes it higher, makes it a little premium. However, I what my intention was by creating the collection was to basically democratize the image of piña. So from it being very stiff and formal, that's why you wouldn't see me in my designs designing purely in just full piña fabric. Because first of all, as a dressmaker myself, I know how difficult it is to sew that fabric. Um, so I combined it with more flexible materials as well. So, and in that approach, by using pinya as a detail that complements a larger casual garment, you can also consider the cost of using less pinya and having a more accessible piece that is made of pinya. So I think in that way, having a more accessible garment that, maybe your introduction to pinya fabric is a way that more people can enjoy that craft. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss DK. And again, thank you, Oseki Sensei, for the discussion. Hi. Now we can now move on to our very last speaker from the Japanese Embassy to the Philippines, First Secretary and JICC Director Shigehiro Matsuda.
Hello, magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. Good afternoon. 皆さん, konnichiwa. I believe you had a very exciting discussion this afternoon. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude for the opportunity to give the closing remarks in this event. It is heartwarming to know that the interest of Filipinos in Japanese fashion, arts, and culture continues to thrive and deepen at the academic level. Thank you to Bunka Gakuen University and the De La Salle College of Saint Benilde for inviting me. To the speakers, Dr. Vincent Tam, Miss Diana Katikbak, Miss Tracy Dizon, Miss Nicole Luna, and our close partner, Mr. Kaloyan Chencha from Asian Center. Thank you for imparting your invaluable knowledge in this event. You embody the role that culture plays in strengthening people-to-people connections between Japan and the Philippines. It is my hope that you will continue to be passionate about your chosen endeavors and that you will never tire of sharing your expertise to others. In particular, I wish to congratulate Miss Nicole Luna, who is currently studying in Japan as a mixed scholar recommended by the embassy. There is a heightened interest in Japan and its culture as it has become more accessible for non-Japanese, especially evidenced by the increasing number of tourists to Japan yearly. However, lectures such as these still provide an important avenue to gain new insights and knowledge on fashion, arts, and culture beyond what is seen in popular media. I'm looking forward to seeing similar events in the future that will help the cultural exchange of our two countries flourish even more. Mabuhay at maraming salamat po. どうもありがとうございました。
Thank you, Sir Shigeru Matsuda. We will now move on to the awarding ceremony.
So we would like to award our guest speakers with a certificate of appreciation for sharing with us their knowledge and insights today. So we would like to award Dr. Vincent Lubitan for his invaluable presence and for sharing his expertise and professional experiences as a guest speaker for Filipino lens on Japanese fashion, art, and culture. Miss Karen Tracy C. Dison. Ay, okay, so, Miss Nicole Luna. Um, Miss Diana Jean Yu Katigbak. Okay. Dr. Carl Ian Uy Cheng Chua.
And with that, may we request everyone for a photo op. Yeah, you can go here on the front. Fix yourselves, prepare your looks. Yeah. Okay, okay.
Okay.
Okay, here in the front.
So much, everyone. Though we took a bit longer, but thank you very much for staying, especially to our esteemed guest, Dr. Vincent Tan, Dr. Car. Uy, maganda inspiration for their thesis. Thank you, everyone. I know you guys have classes also. Thank you, um, Nicole, Luna, and Sensei in Japan. Thank you very much. Also to the Embassy of Japan for joining us. So we'll see you again on the next FDM Talks, everyone. Thank you. Bye.